Eugenie photographed in front of a piece of contemporary art in Doha with her friend, the Australian model Caroline Dower. If Andrew is able to say, well, I spoke to my brother about this and he said it was fine, it's going to be, whatever happens now is going to be completely unprecedented. Everybody is looking at Thames Valley Police Station. Everybody is looking at Marsh Farm, at Wood Farm. Are we going to see a police car driving up that bumpy track later today or tomorrow? Are we going to see a single solitary policeman going in, or are we going to see multiple policemen going in? Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Tom Sykes, the Royalist here, recording this on Tuesday. And let's do a little thought experiment, shall we? Let's imagine that your father has been involved in a massive scandal with tentacles reaching around the world, but is particularly associated with malfeasance and dodgy deals in the Middle East. You've been laying low for some weeks, some months even. You've made one public appearance with the King at Sandringham, going to church, and now you are ready to re-emerge back into the limelight. Where do you go? Do you go to Sussex, rainy old England? Do you go to New York? Do you perhaps go to Europe? Or do you go to Qatar? Well, yes, that is the baffling choice of Princess Eugenie, the younger of Prince Andrew's two daughters, spotted in Qatar last week at that country's edition of Art Basel. They, as part of the ongoing sports washing, arts washing, culture washing of the Middle East, Qatar now has Art Basel. Eugenie, I'm going to give everybody $5 every time I mix up Beatrice and Eugenie, because even I, after all these years, still do it. We are talking about Eugenie, who is, of course, director of Hauser and Wirth. Beatrice is the one who wears the silly hat to the wedding, just to remember who everybody is. So Eugenie, 35, the younger of the two princesses, photographed in front of a piece of contemporary art in Doha with her friend, the Australian model Caroline Dower, who Dower then posted the picture after they'd left. She posted it about 12 hours ago when I'm recording this, so maybe 24 hours ago by the time this goes out, with a caption saying, "Reunion, it's been too long. Yay, everything's so normal. It's so great to see you again. Everything's so totally normal." Look, Eugenie has stayed out of view. Obviously, opinions on these two princesses are divided. On one side, there are those who argue that the sins of the father should not be visited on the children, and that they were very young at the time. They may have technically been adults, but at the time they were being carted off to visit Epstein, they were under 25, shall we say. There are others who say they are up to their necks in it and corrupt in the same way that their parents were, and enmeshed in the networks that their parents set up, and still seem rather keen on extracting money, particularly out of people in the Middle East. That's why I question whether it was really necessary for Eugenie to be at Art Basel, Qatar. Anyway, there we are. Eugenie is, as we know, fighting to retain her position as the patron of the anti-slavery collective. I think that could be a difficult ask unless she comes out and actively speaks out against her father, who looks like he was involved in a sex trafficking ring with Jeffrey Epstein, which, as we know, is a form of enslavement. So, Eugenie, if you are anti-slavery, I think you need to say something about your dad potentially being involved in slavery. That would just be my advice, just my personal feeling. I don't know, maybe other people. Well, actually, they're clearly not fine with it, because she was not at a big launch that the Anti-Slavery Collective did the other day, a big report into counterfeit fashion, fake fashion, and how people are exploited in the manufacture of fake fashion. And I've actually reached out to somebody at the Anti-Slavery Collective, sort of heard a big nothing burger back about how whether Eugenie's still a valued part of the team. I mean, she's still on the website, so we have to assume that she is. Last week, a friend of Eugenie did tell me that she fears she will lose her philanthropic and charity career unless she breaks with her father. There's also been a sort of well-sourced report by Charlotte Griffiths, a sort of friend of various members of the royal family, would probably be the best way to put it, and their circle, a friend of their circle would be a way to put it, saying that Eugenie had completely cut her father off, that it was a Brooklyn Beckham level of estrangement. Now, while all of this is going on, meanwhile, we are anxiously waiting to see whether Thames Valley Police are going to take up the king on his kind offer to help them out with any investigations they may wish to make about Andrew. I contacted Thames Valley Police just before we went on air and spoke to them. They said that the situation, there's no official update yet, but they took my email address and said they would be in touch if there were any updates to come. So let's wait and see. I'm going to have trouble if that update comes at any time after about 7 o'clock this evening, because it's my wife's 50th birthday and I'm going out for dinner with 12 people. And I think she might quite understandably divorce me if I leave her party to post about Andrew. So I'm afraid you'll just have to follow it on other news sources, and I'll be back tomorrow. But before I go, let's talk a bit about where Andrew is today and what is going on today with Andrew. Well, I think there is absolutely no doubt that, as I've been saying all week, the net is tightening. Charles has now effectively yielded to the pressure and has finally done what should have been done 3 years ago and thrown his brother under the bus. What happens when the police show up at Andrew's door, which I think now they have to? I do not see a world in which Andrew cannot be properly investigated when even the king is not exactly calling for that investigation, but certainly making it clear that he doesn't oppose it. It is going to leave the royal family in completely uncharted territory, uncharted waters, because we are going to have justice is carried out in the king's name. That's a really important thing to remember. And there's also the whole Paul Burrell complication, which was that the Paul Burrell trial collapsed because Burrell said that he'd spoken to the Queen about what he allegedly did, which was keeping a lot of Diana's possessions, and that she had given her blessing. So if Andrew is able to say, well, I spoke to my brother about this and he said it was fine, that is going to leave people with a huge number of constitutional questions to answer. Now, my feeling is that ultimately Andrew is going to need to face some form of accountability, not least for the royal family to move past this. I don't know if it's going to end up in court, but I think there has to be a proper and thorough police investigation. Whether it is logistically possible to bring the king's brother to court, I have to say, I think Andrew could have very strong case to fight it just on technical grounds. It would not be the easiest thing in the world, let's be honest. That said, the king has effectively thrown Andrew under the bus yesterday. This is his exact statement. The king has made clear in words and through unprecedented actions his profound concern at allegations which continue to come to light in respect of Mr. Mountbatten Windsor's contact. Okay, nothing much there. While the specific claims in question are for Mr. Mountbatten Windsor to address, if we are approached by Thames Valley Police, we stand ready to support them as you would expect. That's the big change. That is the massive, massive change that potentially spells the end of everything for Andrew. Because if the royal family are really ready to cooperate, and I have been told that the king has told his staff and his office that they are to cooperate with Thames Valley Police and they are to help to the maximum that they can if they are requested to. Well, does that include providing emails, for example, in the sort of British version of Discovery? If we are going to start getting into a world where we're going through Andrew's emails on the royal servers, which are immune from freedom of information, if we are going to have Andrew's protection removed, if Andrew is going to stand in front of the law like anybody else, if he is found guilty of a crime, can we really then still have a situation where he is living on the king's estate, on the king's dime, where the king is supporting him, paying for multiple staff, paying for a house? Who cares whether it's Marsh Farm, Wood Farm, whatever? Who cares? I think that I don't think that is a remotely sustainable situation. And it is certainly not something that William would tolerate. Now, a lot of people have been asking me, I was speaking yesterday about how William making his statement and then Charles making his statement, and Charles's statement completely overshadowing William's statement, and Charles's statement overshadowing William's tour of Saudi Arabia. And people are saying to me, but surely William will welcome his father making this statement. This is what he's been lobbying for all along. Well, yes, I think he will, but I think there is also a thing called timing. And I think that the king could have waited a day or two, but this shows the extent of the discord between the offices. People have rubbished me and said that I have over-exaggerated the conflict and the strains between William and Charles's office. Frankly, these two men are rivals and are in competition. Their offices very much are in competition to do one another down and boost their own principles. So I've been told by a former courtier today, for example, that William will be furious that his father made this statement, completely overshadowing his tour of Saudi Arabia. William, I don't think particularly wanted to go to Saudi Arabia. He was asked to go by the government, but having been asked to go, this has been described as the big ask for the year, you know? And now, who cares about Saudi Arabia? Nobody's looking at William in the desert, looking at organic lettuce farms or whatever on earth he's doing out there, you know, with Mohammed bin Salman. Everybody is looking at Thames Valley Police Station. Everybody is looking at Marsh Farm, at Wood Farm. Are we going to see a police car driving up that bumpy track later today or tomorrow? Are we going to see a single solitary policeman going in, or are we going to see multiple policemen going in? Are we going to see the boxes coming out with the evidence like we saw for Peter Mandelson? Peter Mandelson, don't forget, being accused of exactly the same thing as Andrew is now being accused of, which is corruption in public office, basically handing over secret documents to Epstein in an attempt to curry favor with him and enrich himself. It's going to be, whatever happens now is going to be completely unprecedented. And I think that it is a moment of great, great peril for the royal family. Whatever happens now, there can be no dispute that this is going to be the abiding memory, the abiding impact, the abiding legacy of Charles's reign is going to be how badly he handled the Prince Andrew problem. And he has handled it badly from the beginning. Everybody, we've even seen King Charles himself, his office, trying to pin this on the Queen. Yes, the Queen had culpability. Yes, the Queen should not have allowed Andrew to walk her in to the memorial service for her father on his arm. Yes, the Queen did allow Andrew to rearrange the furniture. And yes, the Queen ultimately signed that massive check to Virginia Giuffre, the first big cover-up of the whole saga. But don't forget that Charles was the co-monarch in those years. Charles was the co-monarch from about 2017 or 2018 onwards, when Christopher Geidt was fired at Charles's request and Edward Young took over. All the important decisions were routed through his office. He was consulted on everything. The idea that he is now trying to blame all of this on his dead mother is completely, it's cowardice. It's cowardice, and it is also, it just beggars belief, because people can see that the last Christmas of Queen Elizabeth's reign, the very last Christmas of Queen Elizabeth's reign, did Prince Andrew go to church with the rest of the royal family at Sandringham? He did not. The first Christmas of Charles's reign, did Prince Andrew go to church with all of the royals at Sandringham? He did. He was back in the fold. It was a very public telegraphing by Charles that he was back in the fold. The second year of Charles's reign, it wasn't just Andrew, it was Sarah Ferguson as well, who hadn't been at a royal Christmas for like 30 years. She'd been at Sandringham House, sometimes behind the scenes, but had never been in that photo call. And that Christmas photo call is one of the most important and iconic images that the royals presented themselves throughout the year. It is the sine qua non of who is in and who is out. And for Charles now to pretend this is all the fault of his mother, that his mother was too indulgent to Andrew, I find it absolutely sickening. Charles has completely mismanaged this from the absolute beginning. These endless stories that were placed in the Times starting about 2-3 years ago, saying that Andrew had to get out of Royal Lodge, the siege of Royal Lodge. It was just ridiculous. It was just absolutely ridiculous. I don't think that really many people, a few obsessives maybe, but I don't think normal people had any idea where Andrew lived until Charles decided to start publicising it. Because frankly, he wants the house for his wife when he goes as a dowager house. You know, for whatever. Like, it's the whole thing has been so badly managed by Charles. And then the final insult, I thought, was last year. I'm sure people watching this channel will remember the initial attempt to sort of deal with the problem was this appalling statement by Andrew saying how honourable he was and that he was going to give up his Duke of York title because he didn't want to inflict any damage on the nation. I mean, it was disgusting that Charles was allowing him to make those statements in his own name on Buckingham Palace headed paper coming out from the Buckingham Palace press office as late as October last year. And then the absolute outrage led by Prince William, which again was something that I reported on significantly on my Substack, The Royalist, which I very much would hope you will consider subscribing to as a free subscriber. And if you really like it, then please do upgrade to paid, but come along as free. I do plenty of free stuff every week. Then Charles to come along and say, oh, actually, I was always going to do this. It was just in the works. I just had to figure it out. Absolute nonsense, absolute rubbish. Like, we're just taken for idiots. And the reason that we're taken for idiots is, frankly, because the British press is so craven and so in Charles's pocket, and they're so afraid of getting their access cut off that they just repeat whatever he says. They just repeat whatever he says. But the thing is that people aren't that stupid. People are not that stupid, and people can actually see what is going on here. And we know what is going on because we can see it with our own eyes. And we can see this weak, flailing king who, frankly, does not look very well. I know he said at Christmas that he was doing much better and stopping treatment, or at least cutting down treatment. But the reality is, if Charles hadn't prefaced that thing of saying, you know, I'm cutting down my treatment, if he hadn't prefaced that by saying, I've got really good news, you would have thought, well, he's going into palliative care, you know? Like, I'm prepared to give Charles, I'm prepared to believe him, you know, I want to believe him. I want to believe that he will live for many, many more years. Of course I do, but he is not fit to be running this operation on his own, whether or not he's going to live for 2 years or 10 years or 20 years. He has to start handing over significant control to his son in exactly the same way that Queen Elizabeth handed over significant control to her son. And this debacle yesterday, where one of them issues a statement at 11 o'clock and then the other one tries to outdo them at 5 o'clock, it's pathetic, and it is so damaging. It's so damaging for the monarchy. Like, we don't care. People don't care whether it's coming from this office or that office or the other office. Like, it's ridiculous. They need to speak as one voice. Charles and William need to get on the same page. And frankly, it needs to be William's page, because Charles has had his chance and he's messed it up really badly. And I think it's completely unfair of him to retroactively try and shift all the blame to his mother when it's clearly not his mother's fault. It was clearly, a part of it was a mother's indulgence for her son. I don't deny that there is an element of that. But, all this briefing that the Queen had handed him an unexploded bomb underneath the throne. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous, as if Charles had absolutely nothing to do with it. Just like, I find it absurd, ridiculous, unbelievable, and very, very damaging for the monarchy. Well, we will see what happens over the rest of today. As I said, you won't be getting me later because I'll be having a delicious meal with my wife and some friends to celebrate her 50th birthday. And then she's an artist called Sasha Sykes, and she's got a show opening in a very fancy gallery in Dublin, not represented by Princess Eugenie, I hasten to add. So thank you very much, everybody, for being here. I wouldn't be surprised if by the time I'm here tomorrow, we have a development in this story. I got the impression when I was talking to the cops earlier, I got the impression that people think that something could happen sooner rather than later.